Self-doubt can creep in even for the most experienced designers. But how do you recognize it, overcome it, and keep moving forward? In this episode of Unmute the Design Dialogue, we are diving into imposter syndrome, that inner voice questioning your skills despite evidence of success. How do designers navigate self doubt, build confidence, and continue to grow in their careers? Our guest today knows this journey firsthand. Before stepping into design, he crafted music videos, embracing the courage to transition into a whole new field. Now, with over 20 years of experience, including 12 plus years at Microsoft, he has honed his craft, proving that the best way to beat imposter syndrome is to keep learning, evolving, and showing up daily. Get ready for an honest, insightful conversation on self doubt, growth, and finding your place in the design world. Please welcome Mark, Senior Product Designer for Purview in Security. Hey Mark, hi. Thank you so much for being on Unmute. And it's such a great pleasure to have you here. We can kick things off with the Unmute's fun way. So I want to start with like if you had to describe yourself in just one word, what would it be?
One word. I think the one thing that comes up to mind now is, especially since it takes up a lot of my time, dad. Um, I'm a dad of two boys, and they are a handful, that's for sure.
Oh, that's so cute. I think it captured, so much about you in just a single word. So yeah, great choice.
Thanks.
Awesome. So we'll dive into today's topic, which is unmasking imposter syndrome in design and in designers. So I want to start with like imposter syndrome is something almost all of us experience, right? And yet it often goes unspoken. We don't really talk about it, share about it. But
Mhm.
what is it for you? Like, how would you define it in your own words?
Oh, I thought you were supposed to help me out with my imposter syndrome. Oh no, just joking.
I don't know. Maybe
Um,
at the end of the session, we too go out without imposter syndrome.
I'm just joking. I think like the way I can define it, the way like I see it or I've perceived it is, it's kind of like it's a series of emotions, and it's a series of emotions that you feel inside that, gives you that feeling of like self-doubt or like it's also sometimes it's like a distortion of yourself towards you look at yourself, um you know yeah, you look at yourself in a way that maybe others won't perceive you, but it's always that feeling of that you're lacking, and then feeling that you're yeah, that you're feeling that you're lacking or you're not good enough for something, right? Or like, it's like I always ask myself that question is, what am I doing here? It's always been like that in my experience, and from being a young designer to now, it's still that thing that, kind of you always kind of check yourself and you realize you're always asking yourself like, what am I doing here? It's like, do I even belong here? like like there's so many people here that just like that are amazing, and like why am I there? So yeah, so I think it's that there's like these series of emotions that you go through that are yeah, that gives you that feeling of self-doubt, and with those emotions are things that you kind of, yeah, sometimes it can feel negative and sometimes it can feel positive, but yeah, that's how I think that's how I can describe it.
Correct. And yeah, I think in fact in my initial years of me being me in the work environment, I used to think maybe it's just me who is feeling like that. It's not with everybody else. You know, the
Mhm,
most accomplished people, they are not probably feeling this. They all are
mhm,
super confident. But
Yeah.
I think it often creeps in even more when we compare ourselves to others. And
Yeah.
especially being in creative fields like design, comparison is almost inevitable. So, how do you
Mm.
manage that balance in this industry?
Um, I think the way that I've it's a realization that I just recently have came up have kind of started thinking about here, and like there is that aspect that you compare yourself, you see someone, you're like, oh man, like how is that, like like I wish I could be like that. And then you start thinking of like, what do I need to do to be like that? Because I think that's what everyone wants to see, or like I have to be that person in order to succeed, because that's how you perceive success, right? And so what I've just come to realize is that um it's actually four letters. It's for me, and it's going to be different for everyone else, is INFP. And like INFP for me is if you've ever taken like a personality test, it's one of those things. It was I did it years ago when when I actually first got married with my wife. We did these personality tests for like this counseling that we did. And the reason why we had to do it was, when we're talking to this counselor, and they were going through different personalities, and then where we may have struggles. And yeah, at the time we never like really realized it, or never really thought through it. But when I was like looking for like a passport renewal for my wife, I was looking through our things, and I actually found my personality test. And I remember that, where like I saw the INFP. And so a lot of the things that I perceived myself that like I had to be to succeed was the total opposite of my personality, right? Being an introverted, I see extroverted people kind of going and, being able to, speak in front of crowds. And it's like, oh, I need to do that. And so a lot of these things that um, I saw as weaknesses for myself. So the introvertness, any of that aspect, I always saw it as weakness. But as I go through like self-reflection, and as I go through trying to understand myself in the journey to try to understand myself, I kind of started thinking, it's just like, wait, no, what if I saw who I am instead of a weakness? What is it as a strength? It's like, what who I know about myself, to where like maybe I don't speak in front of a lot of people, like, big crowds. But now I started realizing, but no, I actually do well when I'm actually talking to someone individually. And so now, as I start looking at that and I start seeing what that means for myself and who I am and the things that I thought were weaknesses, and started flipping, I was like, well, what if they are actually strengths? That's where I started seeing myself in a different light, to where like when I see somebody, I'm starting to start seeing them as like, oh no, that's great. That's who that person is. And then I know where like, I'm starting to understand myself, to where I see my strengths. And then that's where I actually journey to where like I'd be able to kind of go and say, hey, this is what I'm good at. So a lot of this, and a lot of like this imposter syndrome, is that the fact that like now I'm starting to see it. So it was a big realization for me to actually start embracing, or actually understanding who I am, and then accepting that, and then be able to find my strengths. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, it does. It does. It absolutely does. In fact, self-reflection or self-awareness, I think
yeah.
because that comparison, it's a very thin line. We look
Mm,
at people, we get inspired, but then we get paralyzed that
Yeah.
okay, if we are
Yeah.
not that, careful, or if we are not thinking, and I can speak that because I have also, like, even now I experience that I was not at all this person who can, like,
Uh,
come and talk to people. No, I would look
yeah.
at people, ki, okay, you talk, on my behalf or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so easy to, get paralyzed and move on to that
Mm,
side rather getting inspired. So it absolutely does answer the question. And any specific or prominent, maybe examples, if you want to talk about while you were evolving through your, career, were there any prominent, like, stages where where your, imposter syndrome sort of disappeared, or, it lessened down? Because most of us feel that seasoned professionals don't have that. They, again,
mm,
like, super confident. So any examples
mm.
or any instances that you wanna talk about?
Yeah, I mean, different stages from the young designer. Like when, when I first started, I was actually a broadcast or a motion designer. And a lot of the work that I did down in like LA where I started and came from was a lot of freelance. So like the hard thing about freelance is that you're pricing yourself, right? You're taking that reflection and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm worth this much." And then when you're doing freelance, this is how much like I want to charge for my work and everything else. And so that really with that imposter syndrome, when you see other great designers and other, you're like, no, I'm not gonna. So sometimes you undervalue yourself, right? And so like there's different ways to where like I've been able to manage that to where, going from a young designer and then, running a studio for a little bit. And like when you start running a studio, you start realizing that there are other people that can help you. Right. So that's where you can hire a design like a producer and then have a producer be able to see the value in, who you are and be able to kind of go through that. So there has been different ways to where like, you lean on people to be able to do that to, pass on through. And then, with the different stages of that, where like sometimes it's just a lot of it was, leaning on other people until you find your footing and you find and until you go through that journey of trying to understand who you are and then accept the strengths that you have, the uniqueness of you, and then being able to kind of, understand that. And, that's a lifelong journey. This is something that I just barely realized like, years ago. And it's something that I actually like, from my first word, like the way to describe me is, dad is one of the things that, you know, from being a dad is what helped me realize because that's the thing that I see and that's the thing that, I navigate feelings with my kids. And it's one of those things where like it helped me realize that. So if you haven't seen Inside Out, that's it's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, nice. Yeah, such a beautiful answer, but I agree with the struggle that each one of us goes through. It's not like a software upgrade, like, okay,
Yeah,
today I am
yeah,
evolved. No, it
yeah.
doesn't happen. I
No,
wish it did.
it's
Yeah.
definitely going to be a journey, and it's definitely going to be something that as you go through it, just just like the movie Inside Out is you go through all of these emotions, and all these emotions that you feel are normal.
Yeah.
It's how you perceive these emotions are what gives like negative context to it. But all these feelings are normal, and that's one thing I remind my kids is, we can be happy together, we can be sad together, we can be angry with each other. And because it's not just because we're family, it's also because these feelings are normal and we should be able to feel it. And a lot of these things that I felt were certain feelings were negative when they're not. They're just signals for you that your body's telling you
Yeah.
to say, hey, there's something up, like, why don't you feel so, like, you feel these things to as signals versus as something that's negative. The negative connotation comes from your perception of it. So when you think of these emotions, whether it's self-doubt or sadness and angry and like anxiety, those are things that you should feel and they're normal. And it's time for you to think through some of these things. It may not be something that it may not be negative, but it's how you perceive it that makes it negative.
Yeah, true. I think slowly we understand and we better navigate same emotions, I think, and it
Mm.
changes the entire thing. So I agree.
Yeah.
And also, in fact, for me, this has happened. And whenever I talk to even my mentees, they say that, hey, self-doubt can sometimes, push you, help you to improve, right?
Hmm.
But it can also hold us back that, okay, I can't do it kind of feeling.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
how do you differentiate between like healthy self-reflections and limiting yourself?
That comes with time and that comes with experience. And that comes with you understanding who you are. Coming back to that acceptance of, who I am as a person or my personality. So where that's where you can kind of thrive, and that's where you start like looking at problems and not trying to solve them in a way that you can't, but
Yeah.
solve them in a way that you can. And so as you go through and as you find that journey of understanding who you are and your strengths, those are things where like these challenges can start feeling less scary because of the fact that there's no assumption of how to actually solve it. It's the feeling of knowing your strengths and knowing how like the uniqueness of who you are, where your experience is going to be different from everyone else, that you're going to solve this problem in a way that's going to be different than what someone else does. And so once you start accepting that, the challenge becomes less of a challenge or less of I can't do this, but more so I can do this in this way because
Yeah.
I know where I am. So like the self-doubt disappears once you start looking at yourself and understanding who you are, and then
Yeah.
finding that journey of acceptance of being who you are in the way that you need to be, and then being able to solve those problems.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, to take this, in fact, as a whole. I agree. Like, self-awareness is the fuel here, and
Mhm.
just thinking about yourself that no, I can't do it, or basically like self-sabotaging,
Yeah,
self would not do any great. Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I
So
want to
yeah, because
yeah,
sometimes, oh, sorry, and like sometimes you're saying I can't do it because you're looking at a solution in a way that you can't solve it because you're seeing it done in some way. And I've experienced that. It's like, oh no, I have to do it this way. When no, you don't really have to. You solve it in the way that you know how. So
yeah,
that's where the challenge becomes something that is harder to solve when you're trying to you're trying to solve in a way that you know you're you're not comfortable with.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like again, when we start thinking that okay, I can't do this, maybe we have to just zoom out a bit and see
Mm,
if we can. Yeah, agree.
yeah.
Um, so in design, like I want to ask one more thing. Like there is feedback which comes in constantly, right? It
Mm,
could be negative feedback, it could be positive, or I can say it could be critical, it could be
mm,
less critical, but sometimes it triggers your imposter feelings even more. So how do
yeah.
you personally handle, critiques without like letting it again feed your self-doubt?
Oh, that's still a challenge, and that's still a challenge for me. It's a mindset that I'm trying to have, and it's something that I've told many designers and people I've talked through is that the way I believe that design is a convert, like you're being like having being a designer is the most important thing is that you're a communicator, and the things that you design communicates the message that you're trying to relay, whether it's graphic layout for a magazine or, music video and any of these things, right? You're communicating some sort of message out of that. And so the way I try to kind of look at it is that designs are a conversation, and the things that I create or the things that I design is a start of a conversation, not the end of it.
Yeah.
And so that's a constant thing that I try to remind myself is that, you know, as a designer, I'm a communicator, and these are the pieces that I use to start a conversation versus it being something that's a piece, something that you manifest and it's going to be this thing that's yours. It's more so that. So like that mindset, I still struggle with it. That I try to give myself that reminder constantly is that this is a conversation starter, and this is something that we use. You're this is the center of the conversation versus it being something that's like a critique, or versus it's it's hard because like the things that we create are can be something that's um a reflection of you sometimes, right? But I try to separate that and try to be more objective in saying that these things are conversation starters instead of finished pieces.
Yeah, that's a different perspective. Like it's a good perspective. For me, it was so I had one mentor, and he told me that hey, whenever a feedback is given, it's for your work and not for you. So
Mm,
like don't take everything like
yeah,
as if on your self-worth. No, that's not
yeah, yeah.
that's not the healthy way to do that. And though he said I didn't take that like instantly, but slowly when
Mhm,
it got imbibed, it was a game changer. So I think yes,
mhm.
sometimes again we have to think like take everything, listen to everything, but then think, okay,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
critical the critique is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And usually when I try to start reviews, or like when I talk to my, my feature team, is like I kind of started at that, right? It's like, yeah, we're gonna review this. Let's take a look at it, and we need to think about this as, yeah, the start of a conversation. This isn't a final thing. I want your input. I want your perspective, so I can understand what we can kind of create. And so that's kind of like a good way for me to remember that.
Yeah.
And I usually try to start like my like when we're gonna go through designs is I try to say that, and it's for them, but it's also for me to like remind myself that that's going to be something that like, okay.
Yeah, that's nice. And in fact, I wanna come. I think it's a bit of a critical question. So, but most of us, comes across this also. When you are not feeling that confident, especially, and um, so we struggle, right, with the
Mhm,
feeling that maybe somebody is faking it until they make that thing, like we say, fake it until make it. But
mhm, mhm.
sometimes, do you think that's a necessary phase in sort of personal growth, or is there a better mindset to adopt that?
That's a hard question because a lot of my early career, like especially even at working at Xbox, the mantra that I had was like just say yes and figure it out. So I looked at it as a challenge versus it being like, oh, I'm gonna fake it until whatever. It's more so like that mindset change, right? Like it's saying like you're saying yes to a challenge because even though you don't know what the end result will be, it's kind of like that thing where you've taken it on, no matter what it is, no matter it's like it'll come to fruition. And so like I mean, it's similar to that. I think the faking of it, but like when I've done that, it's more so just saying to myself, yes, because it's a challenge, and I want to figure that part out. So I think like when you think about it in at that point, you have like a commitment, but also the fact that like you're also committed to the challenge versus it being like, oh, I'm gonna fake it and I'm gonna like so. So that's been my mindset, especially when I was younger. But as we go through, like, as you go through those challenges, that's where you find your strengths and who you are and what you're going to be good at.
Again, a beautiful perspective. Like, just love that. It's not about faking. It's more of like, okay, you are growing into it. Maybe yes, you are taking a challenge. You'll figure it
Mm,
out on the go while you're working. So yeah, love that perspective. And yes, it has worked even for me. So yeah, great, great, awesome perspective.
mm,
But before we wrap up, we have a signature question of
okay.
Unmute, which is if you could pass one of your secret mantras or
Mm,
mindset for overcoming imposter syndromes, say for new designers or people who are
mm,
just coming into the industry, what would it be?
mm. I think for me is that um, you're here because you're you. You're not here because of the other person that you look at and you say, no, I need to be that person. We all are. We all come with different experiences, and the reason why you're here is because of yourself and your experiences. And so as we go through these problems and as we go through solving these design problems and these unique experiences, um, you're gonna figure it out in your own unique way because no one has the same life experiences as everyone else. And we need to celebrate our diversity, our aspects of the different places where we've been in these all these different life experiences, and then create a more honest and human experience, because that's what we're trying to do, right? Is really build these experiences for everyone. And so when you look at yourself and you look at somebody else, they were hired to be who they were,
Yeah.
and you were hired to be who you are.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to put, in fact, for designers. Like I always feel whenever I feel ki, okay, is that the only right way and stuff? But then
Yeah,
again, when you think, it's like if you're solving unique problems, we should solve in our own unique ways, not others' ways. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that really helps. Great,
yeah.
great
I mean,
takeaway. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't come in and you know, UX wasn't my you know the where I started. I started from creating music videos. And so like now where I landed, this is the great thing about it, is that these different experiences help us create better experiences. And I think like um I cherish all of just the different things that were, it's just like, oh, that's amazing how you know someone that started from doing human-centered design and then someone that started studying motion design can still be in the same space and then
Yeah.
create these experiences that we are.
Uh, that's a great in fact journey shift that you took. But yeah, it
Yeah.
takes it definitely takes lots and lots of courage to do that.
Mm,
And yeah, believing in yourself is the only thing, but the hardest part is what I feel.
mm,
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. This was like super insightful, super honest conversation, and I'm sure our audience will walk away with tons of reassurance today. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you on this show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation.